Greetings from Charlottesville, Virginia. I'm David McCormick for the Charlottesville Chamber Music Festival, and I have with me percussionist Fang and composer Brian Simalchik. And they're going to talk to us today about one of the piece that you're going to hear on today's festival offering. So first, I'm going to have these two introduce themselves. Why don't you start?
Hi everyone, I'm Ijen. I miss seeing everyone in person at the festival and I miss playing with my friends, making music. I'm just glad we still have this chance to communicate with you, to share music with you. I hope everyone is staying safe and healthy during this extraordinary time. And I can't wait to experience live music with you all soon, I hope.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Brian?
sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Brian Smolchik. I'm a composer. I've been in Charlottesville for, oh gosh, about 7 or 8 years now. And I love the Chamber Music Festival. Every September, I look forward to it. Um, go to all the concerts that I can. And I've been lucky enough to have my music played a couple times on it. Ejan has played it a few times. So I'm very excited to be here for this digital-only version of the festival this year, which actually looks really, really cool. I really like the idea of like a new concert, a new thing to watch every day. So I'm excited to experience it.
Yeah, well, we're excited to release it. Um, this is sort of a rare occurrence here that for this festival, that I'm talking to both of you, and we're all in Charlottesville. Everyone else is submitting materials from all corners of the world right now. So this will be our one sort of Charlottesville offering, made in Charlottesville for our Charlottesville audience, and really a worldwide audience, which is interesting that we'll get to show the entire world what we're doing this year. Um, Brian, would you tell us about your new piece, which I understand will be a world premiere?
Yeah, it's a world premiere. So it is a pandemic piece, which is its own category of piece these days. It was written during this COVID pandemic time. Started it back at the end of May. It's a piece for solo marimba. It's in three movements, and the title is Self-Portrait, parentheses, you are not your thoughts. So, Self-Portrait is definitely kind of a very personal, kind of reflective, introspective kind of title. For me, the piece is really about, it was really about the process of kind of doing a deep listening to myself. So I think a lot of us in this pandemic time, creative people, definitely spent a while not doing very much. I certainly spent a bunch of months really not doing anything productive, just like getting through each day felt like an accomplishment. Just living and grocery shopping and figuring out what our new normal was. And as I started to get back into writing music, it seemed like entering this compositional space that was just very present, where I was just generating things and not thinking about it too much, seemed to be the way I could get back into it. So the title is kind of a reference to that idea that I kind of generated this material kind of like without consciously planning it or thinking it. I didn't sit down and say, I have these ideas that I want to communicate, and I have this structure that I want to build, and a lot of things that composers like doing, they love. We often love pre-compositional planning. But in this piece, there's absolutely none of that. It was kind of generated in three kind of very intense sessions, one for each movement, and what came out, I accepted and took and moved forward with. So that creative process was just very free. It was very much a deep listening to like my inner voice, my ear, what kind of came out. And that was actually a really interesting thing to do in this pandemic time. I think that it's kind of a process of like when life narrows and quiets and all the normal things you're used to doing kind of don't happen, what's left? That's kind of what this piece felt like for me. If I put away all the planning and the ideas and just kind of made something, what was it? And the answer, at least for me, is really different than a lot of my music. And I'm really excited to hear it, and I'm excited to share it and see what you all think about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of folks, a lot of artistic folks have experimented with new ways of doing things in this time. I know I have.
Yeah.
Just thinking about, visual aspects and things like that, because we're largely creating virtual material. Eugene, I'm wondering what you have been up to in these months of sort of quarantine and then isolation and all of that.
Yeah, kind of like what Brian said, just the first couple months, just try to get used to the idea that we have to be quarantined and with homeschooling kids, which, I teach a college for a reason, I think. But now I have to teach two elementary school kids. So it was a challenge. But I also really appreciate the time I have with them. That I actually get to tuck them in every night instead of having rehearsals. So I do like that. Yeah, and so I still did some, virtual recording for, performance wise. And I was really happy that Brian's project came about. Actually, before we decide what to play for the festival, we were talking about playing this piece that, Brian just fresh out of the oven. And it came out, it's just great timing, I would say. Like Tim sent me an email, say, choose a piece. I was like, I have one. Yeah, it's actually, I think I got the piece a couple days after Tim's email or something like that. So,
Wow.
Yeah.
Serendipity.
Well, our audience is very lucky then. So Brian, if I remember correctly, this is the first piece for Marimba that you've written?
Yeah, Marimba. I started working on this piece for the Yarn Wire summer festival that I did in May, and I wrote the first movement kind of for that festival, and then the subsequent two later. But yeah, Marimba. Yeah, I'm a pianist. I've written a lot for piano. And when I write for mallet percussion, I tend to write for vibraphone because, like the piano, it has a resonator pedal, so it can ring. And I've always been attracted to those ringing sonorities. I mean, it's, they're amazing. Just the kind of decaying landscape of sound kind of fading. But for this festival, I had to write for what was in the percussionist I was working with in her house, and she had a marimba. And so it was sort of like, it sort of felt like like the pandemic in a nutshell. It's like, well, I wouldn't have chosen this, but I'm going to make do with what is here. And kind of what I discovered is actually, like, I've had this kind of bias against the marimba, I think, that like is really based on nothing. Just one of these automatic thoughts that, like, when I actually looked at it, like I've loved writing for it. Like I definitely will write for it again. Just like, yeah, just for some reason thought that it wasn't my percussion keyboard percussion instrument of choice, but it's a wonderful instrument, and it can do so many amazing things, and Egen is a master of it.
Yes.
she is incredible, and like really truly, like the piece only exists because of like the work we've done together. I know the piece is called like SelfPortrait. Like definitely there's a lot of things like I was thinking about, like my own head and process about it, but like I think it's also like, as all music like should hope to be, like the performance of it is as much an equal partner, in the creative act as the generation of the music, like the interpretive art of a performer, and the embodying of the music, like, is the music. It doesn't exist until then. So really the piece A wouldn't exist without Egen's input in the process. B doesn't exist until she plays it on stage, virtually or not.
Yeah, I was thinking about this this morning, Egen, that like as a violinist, I'm usually playing the music of old dead white guys. And as a percussionist, I'm imagining it's the complete opposite for you, that you're actually most of the time getting to work with living composers, or a lot of the time, certainly more often than I am. And I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about that process, even specifically this piece and the process that you guys have engaged in.
Yeah, I think, I'm really lucky. The instrument I play, I get to work with living composers, and I'm lucky also a lot of composers like to write for percussion. And I really love working with living composer, the process of making the music. And, we are not just at the receiving end with the piece of paper, that you feel like the music actually involve you. And even though that's the composer's idea, but you have your input, you put your feel and thought into it at the same time, and to develop the piece. And like even just phrasing per se, like we can talk about how we want the phrasing, so he can finalize his phrase mark after we talk about it, and after he hear me play, and I can show him several options, and then he can be like, oh, I like this one, yeah. So yeah, it's just a really fun. And even though we are in quarantine, but I feel like in some way it actually worked out better in this process. Communicating, it's easier, we don't have to find a time that we can all be in one place at one time. We can do it in the pleasure of our home. And yeah, and of course the Zoom has its limitation with sound. Yeah. So we also find a way that I just record, so with a better sound quality, and I send it to Brian, and he can give me comments. So I think we all find a way to work around in the situation, and I think it actually worked out really well.
Yeah, excellent. I'm trying to think what else we should talk about. Brian, do you have anything else you want to add about the piece?
About the piece, I guess not too specifically. I think the piece it's in 3 movements again. The last movement's the longest by far. The first movement's kind of the middle length, and the second movement's very short. I think that, to me, all music should sort of speak on its own without any accompanying information. It should say something compelling. So there's no specific programmatic thing or anything like that to think about. I do think the music kind of goes on this journey, and it's quite free and kind of flowing. Mm-hmm. It's definitely not made of 4-bar phrases or kind of like an old form, but it's very much interested in kind of a continual variation and kind of examining material like from different angles and kind of playing around with it and looking at it. I would also say there's like a good amount of silence and space. Mm-hmm. And I was definitely thinking, yeah, there's a quote about kind of a great Canadian composer, Linda Catlin Smith, who's marvelous, talks about like, there's some music that goes off on grand adventures, and you journey and you go really far, and it's really dramatic, and you travel hundreds of miles and you see lots of sights. And there's other music that kind of maybe stays in a smaller space and kind of circles around material and examines it more closely, and it's kind of more intimate and focused. And I think that kind of describes this music. It kind of is, each movement kind of is circling around this material, but I think it finds inner worlds inside of that material, and finds interesting things that happen inside of it. Things that surprise me while generating this material, hopefully surprise and interest the listener. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting, because I feel like our festival this year is a little bit like that. It's intimate, and we're inviting people to sort of take a journey around each piece. We're releasing 1 piece a day with a lot of accompanying material for people to explore and enjoy. And so I think it's a nice way to bring your new piece into the world in a way that gives people some time to explore it through something like this, and through the program notes, and through getting to watch the performance more than once.
Yeah.
You never get that in a live performance. You get a new piece of music, you hear it for the first time, your mind is blown, and then unless it becomes part of the canon, maybe you never hear it again.
Right. Right. As a composer, the second performance is the hardest. Right. Yeah. No, I think it's a really interesting way of presenting music. I mean, like you said, you're kind of giving people an opportunity to focus on one piece a day, and on a program you might have 5 to 7, and you kind of are trying to think about all these different things. But this enables a deep dive, if if you want to take it. If not, it can just be something to enjoy and move on. Yeah.
Yeah. Eugene, is there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I definitely had a lot of fun playing, practicing this piece, even though I didn't have a lot of time, but it it kind of speak to me, the piece, the self-portrait. And then it's such a beautiful piece that I grab on right away.
Mm.
So I'm very fortunate to have the opportunity to work with Brian on this piece.
That's wonderful. I will say that I was sort of writing the piece before I reached out to Eugene, but like I was always planning on sending it to you, and so I think that I was always kind of thinking of you in my mind. Um, and yeah, it's been a joy to work on it together. I think we've known each other for years now. We've worked on a couple different projects, and it's always fun. So glad to be doing it again. And writing a solo piece for you, like I definitely wanted to give you something that you could really like sink your teeth into and make your own and like feel was satisfying. So if that's how you feel, then I'm happy.
Awesome.
Yes.
All right. Well, we're all really looking forward to this recording, and we're actually recording this before the recording that you're doing, I guess, tomorrow, is it?
Yep.
In Old Cabell Hall. Be really nice. This will be, I think, the only performance that we're getting in, well, it is for sure the only performance that we're getting in one of the actual venues where our Chamber Music Festival usually happens. So I think that'll be very comforting to our audience. So anyway, thank you both so much for joining me today for this Q&A session.
Thank you.
Great, thanks, David.